You know, I was part of the way through writing this script before I realized that this will probably be the first and last time I'm ever going to write a review for a game, considering my track record with starting series but never finishing them. Between that and the fact that all of those were things that literally no one asked for, the odds of this being a constant thing is slimmer than Slim Shady. The only way to fix this is to change my middle name to Consistency, because maybe legally changing it to that will remind my early onset dementia-ridden mind to actually stick with the ideas I have moving forward. Or I could just change it to Jigaboo and promptly find a tall tree to lynch myself from. I like that idea, since I won't have to remember experiencing this game afterward. Speaking of lynchings, Mafia 3 was made by Hanging 13 Negroes and published by the only game-related company that black people know of, 2K Games. The people who only publish sports games for people like me who are too lazy to go outside and play real sports. If that wasn't bad enough, I'm only reviewing this game because I got it free on PlayStation Plus several months ago. Last year. Yes, I know I'm slow, but bear with me. It'll only get worse from here. Yeah, I know this game is about as old as that pack of vegetables you have sitting in the back of the freezer that has more frost in it than vegetable. Talking to you, Mom. But I felt like I had more to say about it than Redder, Deader, Raunchier 2. Especially because I don't own that game. Goodness knows I'd have to watch my words carefully if I were to review that game. Otherwise I'd end up tied down to some train tracks, only for the guy recording it to get his YouTube channel banned for committing a hate crime. Moving on, Mafia in Black 3 is one of the most forward-thinking games I've ever played, because it actually has a black protagonist that isn't black for the sake of being black, because it actually has an impact on the overall story. I may or may not be lying about that previous statement, but the only way you'll find out is by giving me that sweet watch time. I use the word protagonist loosely now that I think about it, because he's a hardcore criminal from the start of the game that I control. And since I'm a semi-functioning psychopath, giving myself a little bit too much credit there if you ask me, I will make him kill literally everyone in sight unless the game tells me I can't. Honestly, it works out better that way, because at least when I decide to ignore the story for a while to go on a drug and alcohol-infused rampage, running over pedestrians and murdering cops, he's a criminal from the start. So the cognitive dissonance isn't too jarring. When playing through this game, I wasn't sure whether to be offended or empowered by the fact that I'm playing a big strong black boy who don't need no man, while at the same time playing a big strong black boy that's more racist to Haitians and white people than I am. On the topic of racism, this game got a lot of backlash in certain circles of people because the developers liberally use the bad boy N-word a lot. And I never really got why this is, since you can shoot down women and minorities in this game just like GTA. And yet it somehow went over better than the controversies about literally every other GTA game. I'm just going to put this out there before I get turned into a tree ornament. I'm going to be making quite a few comparisons to GTA throughout this video. And not because literally every other reviewer is going to do it and it's the easiest bandwagon to get onto, but because you can't stop me and I won't stop myself because I have no self-control. Just ask my empty bank account and fat gut. Mayflower 3 gave me the greatest first impressions when I started it up by showing me a shit ton of logos for companies I don't know nor care about, and then prompted me to sign into my My2K account that somehow I already had. Okay, whatever. Once all of that was finished, done, and completed, we get thrown into the title screen, which in my opinion is about as basic as the toilet paper brand. If I were to change it, I would just add some bodies dangling from the trees. Mwah! Perfect. Other than that, what the fuck is this music? Hell, even I know the backwoods of Louisiana are home to swamp people, yeehaws, and banjos, but this is just insulting to a black redneck such as myself. Anyway, the game actually starts with a trigger warning, and to be frank, that triggered me more than the amount of times I've heard ER drop throughout this game. And this is coming from the guy who's dropped ER more than he's been dropped on his head as a child. So that should tell you a lot about my personality. After that, we get a cutscene that gives you an introduction to New Bordeaux, and even more French New Orleans. The scene cuts between that and some scenes of the main storytellers of the game, essentially spoiling what's going to be going down throughout the plot. And folks, this is pretty much the entire plot laid bare. It's a basic revengeance plot before you boyos and girls, and so this video reaches 10:01, I'm going to go into deeper detail. These main storytellers are Father James, a generic black priest who not once in this game said anything along the lines of, "And in Jesus' name, amen," which is entirely unrealistic, as black priests are contractually obligated to say that about once every hour on weekdays, once every 30 minutes on Saturdays, and once every 5 minutes on Sundays. Second, we have Donovan, your generic CIA intel guy. He fought in the Vietnam War with Lincoln Clay, our protagonist. I can't be the only one who thought he was going to be some sort of traitor throughout the entire game, but besides that, he was my favorite character. Throughout the game, he's really humorous and snarky, and he stands out as one of the only white people in the game that isn't a criminal or a racist. Finally, we have Dr. Hill from Until Dawn. Man, he's really fallen from his status of being a hallucination, since now he's obsessed with bringing down Lincoln. And that's all I know about him. You never actually interact with him throughout the game. He's just a storyteller. You never actually see him. He's the guy who didn't get invited to all the fun, and is now making a documentary to shame the people who took part without him. These three drop all of the backstory and further information on what's currently going on in the game, because the other characters, including Lincoln, don't really seem to speak on it with the exception of key moments, which we'll cover soon. James gives a quick summation of Lincoln's backstory, which can be summed up as he was abandoned by his mother. Huh. That's surprising. It's usually the fathers that... Anyway, he got dropped off at an orphanage that was closed down some odd years later, and he ended up with a man named Samuel Robinson, who ran a black mob and somehow owed money to the Italian mob. I don't know if that's ever actually explained in the story. I stopped paying attention after 5 minutes because it was so boring. He ran off to the army to serve a country that hated him for his skin color. Then when he came back, he was immediately doing bank heists for the Italian mob to pay off the debt that Sammy owed and get a little bit of that
quid, dosh, readies, bread and honey, wanga
for himself. You'd think that he'd take a break after all that crazy shit that happened during the war, but nah, of course he wouldn't. Man, I can already tell I'm too black for this shit. The racism starts off lovely, as pretty much every guard in the bank hates blacks. Hell, your partner, Georgie, even has to warn you that he'll have to play along to not raise suspicion. The heist goes well for about 5 minutes before Georgie raises the alarm like a dumbass. You have to play defend the dosh for a while, and then have an escape sequence in a tunnel a la Metal Gear Solid, but with cops and boats instead of cars and For the record, this section was an absolute garbage fire, because the boat feels like you're trying to steer a plane after it's already been shot down by a Ukrainian anti-air missile. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because they decided to pull a sort of in media res out of their asses, and send us back to when Lincoln first came back from the war. He meets up with his stepbrother, Ellis, who you don't need to remember for too long, trust me, and they head back to the house to get absolutely with the rest of the people who were close to Lincoln. After dealing with that hangover quicker than a neckbeard comes at a waifu body pillow factory, Lincoln heads over to the community kitchen to help out like the protagonist he's supposed to be. But everything changed when the Haitian nation attacked. After whipping some ass, he goes back to confront Sammy about the Haitian situation, where he's told to put those big black nigger hands to good use and do things quietly. That's to not show people that black on black crime actually exists. So after you go around breaking necks and shooting people in the face, he breaks Baka's neck. And yes, his name is Baka. Out of the cupboard pops some fucking Haitian lady named Cassandra, who beats a dead nigga's ass before running away. She'll become important later. After going back and having a talk about luck on the battlefield with Sammy, we finally meet Sal Marcano, the big bad boy of New Bordeaux, and he's got an offer you can't refuse. He wants to rob the Federal Reserve, and on top of that, he wants Lincoln to run the Hollow, which he respectfully declined, but they'd still go on to do the heist. Over the next few minutes, we'd meet the Burks. Daddy Burke got fucked over by Sal, and is injecting Sonny Burke into the heist as a way to try to win Sal back on his side. Yeah, we'll see how well that goes, buddy. Back to the heist, they have to climb up and out of the canal to the streets where they have to try to act as natural as a white guy with giant bags of money, a big black guy, a small black guy, and a guy with a bloody busted up leg being carried by said big black guy can be incognito. They inevitably get cornered, and instead of them all running and hiding, Lincoln takes the blammer from Georgie and fends off the cops and makes his way to the getaway car that for some reason doesn't have a top on it, making it easy for the cops to recognize them and give chase. These guys will fit right on in World's Dumbest Criminals. Then again, they do somehow get away and aren't on some type of wanted list for robbing the Federal Reserve. So maybe World's Dumbest Cops would fit better. They make it back with
hella cash
and start to celebrate, except Lincoln gets blasted, everyone else gets bodied, and Marcano says, "Stupid fucking niggas," and then the place gets burned down for good measure. And it was at this point in the story where I started to think that Hangar 13 were getting off to being able to say nigger freely. And don't you get on me about saying it, motherfucker, because they can too. Mr. Trigger Warning said so. To be fair, if I could be openly racist, I would, because racism is like your long lost uncle. He might not come around often, but there's always people like me that'll welcome him back with open arms, then sit on the couch with a brewski and listen to him tell so bad it's good jokes. What the fuck am I? You know what? I'm just gonna move on before I make myself look more like a Klansman who's too inbred to know what the word subtlety means. Side note, the voice actor for Marcano low-key is the best in the game. This man whips me right back to slavery whenever I hear him say nigger. Anyway, because Jesus made it so, Father James saved Lincoln from the fire and brimstone. Your boy gets nursed back to Superman status, and has a pretty sick scar left over from being shot in the fucking head. Father James insists that he turns the other cheek, but Lincoln decides to actually go against what religion taught him and takes things into his own hands. He links up with Donovan to plan their next move, and it's all uphill from there. He tails and interrogates some Haitians to find their leader, who ended up being Cassandra herself. Turns out the bitch was faking to be captured to keep her cover. What else is new, right? After having a talk at gunpoint, she points you in the direction of an informant that will help you take out the person who took over the Hollow, Richie Doucette. You take out a bunch of his underdogs by completing a few rackets, and then you lynch him from a Ferris wheel. Bit extreme, don't you think? As much as I like seeing this boy dangling, this right here is about how 80% of the game is going to go. You get pointed in the direction of someone that needs to get manhandled, and then you handle him like a man. It's straightforward, repetitive, it makes it hard to write about the story because in a way, the story is very disconnected. Once you get to a certain point, it becomes mindless busy work that does lead to a payoff eventually, but it leaves a sort of void in between the major story beats, which are the big assassination missions. Think of it like the Infamous games, but worse. In those games, you'll probably end up doing side activities for the blast shards and for the district control in between main missions. But at the end of the day, it isn't mandatory, nor is it linked to the story. Mafia 3 is like taking all of those side missions and making them mandatory to continue the story. These rackets do have small stories inside of them, but they're all about as deep as the kiddie pool. So in the grand scheme of things, it's just a mark on a checklist. Next on that same checklist, we're meeting up with Vito Scaletta and Thomas Burke. Both were left to shit after the heist, and it's your goal to get them back on your side. First up is the most Italian mobster I've ever seen, Vito. Vito was essentially being strangled out of all the money he had by Marcano, and since he couldn't pay up, he could get Vito whacked. Luckily, Lincoln saves him from a literal freezer just in time. There's just still one loose end before Vito can get back to business. Greco, Marcano's nephew. Second verse, same as the first, you deal with his rackets and make your way to him, and proceed to chase his ass around because he's a big old fat vagina, but inevitably you catch him because you're the main character of a video game and you take him back to Vito's place to recreate the torture scene from GTA 5, but somehow it's even more pitiful. Greco reveals that Marcano was building a casino and is gonna get laws changed so that gambling would be legalized. He wants to go legit so he and his family can ditch all of the illegal shit and get those targets off of their heads, maybe settle down for a bit. I really don't see how that's a bad thing in the long run, but there's also Marcano we're talking about here, so they probably just want to stop him because he's a prick. Last, but probably least, is Daddy Burke. After Sonny Burke got turned into overcooked bacon, Burke's life went to shit, and now he's doing the generic Irish thing and getting absolutely shit-faced all the time at a dive bar. You find him stumbling around a back alley, practically pissing himself drunk. Actually, no, he's literally pissing himself drunk, for fuck's sake. He's so stubborn that you have to steal his car and drive around like a maniac to impress him, though it's probably more like scaring him sober. After that adventure, he points you in the direction of the butcher, some fat cunt. Third verse, same as the other two, except that Burke's dumbass pretty much tells them where he's gonna ambush them at, and even dumber, they actually come to the ambush spot in single file lines, in cars, right next to the shiny red explosive barrels. Dumbasses. Then the fat cunt threatens to ass fuck another man, and considering how ugly he is, I bet he couldn't even get any kind of booty with money. After that scuffle, the three big boyos and Black Girl meet up in an abandoned building in the bayou to discuss the big plan that's going to spread out throughout the rest of the game. Okay, so this is going to blow your mind. There are these people, right? They need to die. So go kill them. Genius! This is where the story section gets rancy, boys and girls, so strap in. The overall story and characters themselves don't really move at all beyond this point until the very end of the game, and that's my major problem with this story. Both are very bare bones and predictable because it makes the main story and character growth the weakest parts of the game. As you take out the lieutenants and capos, you learn more about how Sal's operation is run, and that's about all you're getting, Sonny Jim. In terms of how those missions play out, they can actually be quite fun since they're the longest missions and actually have some weight to them in terms of the story. The fact that after I played the game, some of the only moments I remember was shooting up a Klan rally, recreating the Titanic, shooting a guy in the skull several times only for him to drive away like nothing happened.
What the fuck?
Or my favorite, pulling a hitman blood money and disguising myself as a waiter to deliver drug drinks to grieving racists, while being called nigger by a guy whose skin color blends in with the asphalt so well that if he got ran over, no one would find his body, means that at the end of the day, these are the best parts of the game by a long shot. If there were more of those missions, the game wouldn't be as stale as it is for the majority of the runtime. Even with those moments though, the missions always boil down to big black man shows up, proceeds to bust several melons, then walks away scowling. Occasionally he calls a comrade to take over a racket or 20. By the end of the game, you stroll up to the casino, kill the rest of Marcano's men before they can
plant that goddamn nigga in the ground.
Kill Georgie and Marcano himself. After a very drawn out villain and hero have a heart-to-heart before villain's death conversation. Afterward, you're contacted by Leo Galante in person. Who is he? Who the fuck knows? He makes you a deal that you can in fact refuse to get the, and I say this with the looseness of a Kardashian's vagina, best ending. Or you can run New Bordeaux and the rest of the South with your underbosses. Or you can be an absolute Sal Marcano, kill your underbosses, and then get assassinated via car bomb by Father James? Wow, that was anticlimactic. Fucking hell, all these endings are kind of shit. Either Lincoln is stuck running and hiding, he gives into the greed, or he gives into the greed with a hearty dose of. The best thing to come out of the ending is
plant that goddamn nigga in the ground right next to us.
Goddamn if it doesn't feel like the voice actor was actually saying that about some guy in his own life. They snuck up on him and recorded it in the heat of the moment. Honestly, I didn't enjoy the story throughout this game because of See Previous, and because it presents itself as a mostly serious 1960s revengeance crime drama. And while for some people it works, for me it works about as well as trying to use a plastic bag as a parachute. You always end up falling flat on your ass. And don't tell me you didn't try that as a kid, motherfucker, because I know you did. Everyone did. I much prefer the stories in the GTA games because while they have their more serious moments, they have a lot of funnies and charms along the way, which keeps the player anticipating for the next actual serious moment to come along because it's not serious 101% of the time. Not to mention the GTA stories usually aren't completely bland and predictable. Well, I mean, except for the part where they're ex-criminals getting back into the criminal life, that's pretty much always the same. Wait a minute. I just realized that GTA's main characters are like the arrested hero in the Elder Scrolls games, except in reverse. I never made that connection until now. And knowing Bethesda, they'll probably find some way to ban Rockstar for reusing an idea. I know it's all personal preference, but I don't play games to experience the bold and the beautiful of storytelling. That shit's for old people, and I'm a spry young gay boy who ain't got time for that. Only a couple characters really interested me, even though they all seem to be cliche to an extent. Burke had me a bit interested because he was an Irish drunk, and those people usually give me a good chuckle. But even still, I couldn't crack a smile when he did or said dumb shit because it was all, say it with me now, cliche. The one who actually interested me was Donovan because he was actually humorous, but he was also a cliche informer who somehow knows literally everything and anything that the pro tag needs to know. To be real, cliches aren't inherently bad, but when everything else falls flatter than my middle school crush's tits, the cliches just stick out more than they really should. GTA suffers from the cliche syndrome sometimes too, but in those cases they're usually parodies or deconstructions of the character tropes. I think there's a lesson to be learned here. Don't really take yourself too seriously when it comes to story writing, because it sort of drags the whole experience down when you don't give the audience a bit of a chuckle every now and then. And this is coming from the guy who's writing nothing but shit jokes. What isn't complete shit, however, is the gameplay and graphics, which in my opinion outshines the story in terms of quality. But oh, don't you worry, Danny boy, I'm gonna give them a good spanking too. The game looks and sounds pretty great for the most part. All the textures are detailed enough to not make me vomit at a mere glance at them. There was some slight pop in here and there, but it was so unremarkable that I didn't even write the timecodes down for them. Except for this one instance where I couldn't even ignore how the lights popped on as I drove through the tunnel. Felt like I was coming out of the Batcave or some shit. The 1960s style of the game kind of stuck with me throughout, except for when I saw the rain and immediately wanted to play single player Russian roulette when I realized they pretty much took the generic anime shocking moment streaks and made that into a rain effect. It's a shame when MGS2, a game from the PS2 era, has more convincing rain effects. Fuck, I could look outside my window right now and tell you that the rain looks more like millions of tiny bullets hitting the ground, not streaks of rain hitting the ground. The skyboxes aren't too savvy either. It doesn't look as realistic as it should, considering the rest of the textures. Minecraft skyboxes look better, and that's a game entirely made out of fucking boxes. While the graphics are alright, the voice acting is amazing to me. But this is coming from the same guy who thinks Cars 2 is a good movie, so take that with a pound of salt. The controls come with a couple of huge asterisks. They went with a mix of shooter game, driving game, and Gators Torn Asunder's control scheme. I was a bit peeved when I frequently dived out of cars and face planted the cement because I'd hit square to handbrake, forgetting that it's the use button, or I'd try to climb and just be mashing square for several seconds until I got the memo that it's triangle to do the extremely manly parkour. It's really not as bad as I'm making it sound, in this instance anyway. The game mechanically is too solid for me to not bend it over and give it a good lashing just to make the review feel fair, because otherwise I'd be ejaculating all over it. There are some controls in this game that I hate more than hemorrhoids, and trust me, we'll get there. The car customization is nowhere near what you could do in GTA 5, even when it first came out in 2013. It's barely passable even considering the rather small car collection on offer, and even smaller is the cars that you can actually customize. It's not uncommon to see a car in a lot performing a multi-shadow clone jutsu. Since we're on the topic of vehicles, the radio has some pretty good music, but it's all about as lackluster as my ex's dick size. There's only about 3 channels that'll wear thin quickly to the point where you'll just turn it off and start listening to a retard like me talk for a while. A lot of the songs are classics, go figure, so none of it was Lil Wayne, Lil Peep, or Lil Uzi, so it didn't Lil stack up to my Lil standards. Even if I wanted to play those songs here, I can't because, you know. There are a shit ton of collectibles in this game. I mean like way too many. And this is coming from a completionist, just without the sick ass beard. For an example, there's scrap that you can collect to gain access to the Ubisoft towers, trademark, of this game, junction boxes. These are miles better because all you have to do is walk up to it, bust it open with this lockpicking mechanic which blows, and then you put a rewire tool in it and then blam, you can see the rest of the collectibles within range of it, which range from more scrap, posters, magazines, and Playboys. I'm more into Game Port magazine myself, but to each their own, right? Robbing stores is a thing you can do, but it's more hilarious than rewarding. In GTA Online Edition, you can actually rob the place in a more realistic way to get the most benefit and immersion by pointing a rocket launcher at his face and yelling into the microphone for him to hurry up, a feature that everyone used for about a month after the game launched and then never used again.
Alright, put the money in the bag! Put it in!
Otherwise, you could be a complete psychopath and just bust Fareed's melon and take the cash for yourself. However, in Mafia 3, there's no option for realism. So all you can do is walk past the cashier or channel your inner NBA star and slam dunk the poor bastard into the dirt and then snatch the $5 from the register. Yeah, that wasn't really worth it, was it? Well, if you consider inflation, that'd be about $1,000 today, so maybe it was. Speaking of money, there are Rackets, which is just a fancy name for busting some shit up, where you go around sabotaging businesses run by people somehow connected to the main cockmongrel of the game, and they are usually done by killing or interrogating a specific guy, sabotaging and destroying equipment, freeing hookers, or telling a guy like some sort of great value purple Aki, but more murdery than rapey, and then proceeding to slaughter the entire Leaf Village. In one memorable case, I had to blow up a bunch of cars and only had a handful of grenades. So I piled up the cars next to a generic explosive when shot, red barrel, and watched the cars explode one by one. That was about as bombastic as this game gets. I mean, I also like the time where I raided a Southern Union nigger auction, but that was for more personal reasons. This game isn't getting very many dubs, so I'm taking what I can get. At the end of all that nonsensical red rubbing, you do a Destiny-style raid and slaughter the guy's minions, run up on him and blast him in the ass with several buckshots before holding him hostage with a knife? Hey buddy, I'm pretty sure those bullets should have ended your life already, seeing as your lackeys got torn through like the tip of a long strip of tissue paper that you accidentally dipped in the shitty toilet water when you go to wipe your ass. No? I guess that's just a me problem then. Anyways, you can either kill the cracker right then and there for a measly amount of money, or let him live for profit over the long term. And who actually chose the first option? Unless you were desperately trying to pay the hooker you 50 Shades freed because we know that's the only way you're going to get any action, there's absolutely no benefit for going for the first option. There's an underboss mechanic tied to these rackets where you can give control of the businesses you destroy to your underdogs, who in return give you a share of the profits, perks, and services, and not the fun kind either. I mean, unless you consider calling for backup in a fight or having someone deposit cash for you as fun. The services they provide are mostly for convenience. You can call a guy in an orange rape van with several guns and upgrades for them, Lincoln, and cars in it, and perform a transaction in broad daylight in front of the cops, in the middle of the fucking road. I can't imagine this is legal, but when I slightly kiss someone's bumper, the cops lose their shit and proceed to recreate the Trayvon Martin case on me. Beyond that, there are side missions that you can do for your underbosses at your own leisure, and these are bad. Like really bad. You go up to them and they tell you to fuck off to go do some basic ass task like stealing a specific vehicle or killing some random guy. They have their own reasons for sending you to run the errands that they were too lazy to do themselves, but they're no more interesting than the reasons your grandmother would send you to go grab some groceries for the house. These felt just like mindless busy work, and I suffered through most of it for this, so you better be grateful. At certain times, you'll be asked to assign a district to one of your underbosses. Doing so will give all the rackets in that district to one of your underbosses, potentially leading to you losing favors and respect from your other underbosses. I genuinely adore this mechanic because it actually makes me think about the pros and cons of making a choice. This one choice is more impactful than any of the choices in a Telltale game. So impactful, in fact, that the first time it happened, I sat there for 5 minutes flipping between the options to make sure I was making the right choice for my playstyle, which just ended up with me splitting it evenly between everyone throughout the entire game because I was too much of a pussy to lose anyone. That could be due to my indecisiveness, but I refuse to point the finger at myself because I'm better than that. Driving is a thing you'll do throughout this game, and that's where I feel like a decent bit of the differences are, and where I think the game is in some ways worse off for it. Or maybe not, I can never really decide with these things. What makes my engine burst into flames is that the cars handle like they have molasses chew strapped to the tires when trying to do anything other than move straight forward, and I'm not sure if that's really a good thing or not. I mean, on one hand, the driving feels a bit more realistic than Gucci t-shirt assembly lines. Obviously, you can't whip a 2-ton death machine around faster than meat spin, but at the same time, that's what makes the driving in Great Taiwanese asses so fun. The arcadey driving makes the world a lot less of a hassle to travel in, especially when driving in tightly packed city streets. While in Grand Treasonous Arsonist, I can whip and nay-nay in and out of traffic without thinking about it. In Marmalade 3, I can barely make a simple 30-degree turn without turning the gray and brown streets or insert French word here into a 1960s rendition of Burnout Revenge. The braking of any vehicle has the strength of a newborn baby, which is a roundabout way of saying I have to brake about 2 miles up the road if I want to even have a chance of making a turn without sliding past it and hitting every lamppost, tree, and newborn baby on the block. Still better than GTA 4 driving though. Mind you, that's with the normal driving option on. With the simulation driving on, it's worse than Russian Man Plays Bowling 4 when it comes to the handling, where it feels like the wheels are covered in motor oil and KY jelly because they won't actually grip to the road until I hit the brakes. And once I do, it feels like the wheels signed a contract where if they let go of the road whatsoever, Mr. Goodyear Tires is going to give their mama a lot of damage with their monkey wrenches if you catch my drift, which is something you can't easily do in this game in simulation driving mode. In normal driving mode is possible, but it's a lot more of a struggle to pull it off cleanly, if I haven't made that clear already. Considering I couldn't even write a simple BCR in high school without the veins in my forehead bulging out like I'm going
Even further beyond!
I probably didn't. These issues are remedied by the addition of slow-mo driving, which bothers me because when I use it, it actually feels like I have the type of control I wanted out of the driving. I would be fine with this if I didn't feel like on almost every street corner or crowded straightaway, I had to whip out the bootleg Matrix skills and dodge other cars like they were bullets, because otherwise I'd end up shot. I mean in a near-fatal car accident, which isn't even fun in this game because you don't rocket out of the windshield and make love to the nearest concrete wall. All these controls don't make the racing any better either, because there you don't have your bootleg Matrix skills to make the driving any less dysfunctional than Stephen Hawking before and after he died. On top of that, the AI in the races rubber band randomly. I get behind them and they slow down to a crawl and condescendingly honk their horns at me like I'm some paraplegic attempting the triathlon.
Oh, little tank.
But once I get in front of them, they either ride my ass harder than the towel heads, or they shoot out in front of me, give me the biggest middle finger imaginable, and proceed to show off their white privilege. I make sure to ram every one of these pricks off the road, assuming it doesn't also spin me out as well, because ramming is supposed to be the equivalent of a schoolyard bully pushing someone over, then immediately tripping over the kid he just pushed over, right? Whatever. The same crap extends to the boat controls, except it doesn't have slow-mo, which in all honesty got me killed a few times early on in that heist escape. Now that I think of it, I kinda hate the cops too, because with them, they watch you like Big Boss watches the wild animals when choosing his next meal. Unlike in gutter trash among the rest, you are punished for driving like an Asian with no hands, feet, and slants for eyes, which I dislike because one of the best things to do in gums to ass is drive around like the bubble guts are coming on, but you're a few miles away from home. So you put the pedal through the floor while somehow managing to skillfully avoid running the pedestrians over in your monster truck. It's not inherently a bad mechanic. I mean, it's pretty immersion breaking when I crash full speed into a crowd of cars in a fucking monster truck, and as long as no one dies or the cars don't blow up, the cops just sit around watching like it's a normal Sunday afternoon. If I tried to pull this shit in real life, I'd be shot on the spot because I'm black and not because I just caused thousands of dollarinos in property damage and maybe crushed a newborn baby. In my own subjective view, the cops in this instance are hindrance on fun, because who doesn't like showing off their thick, juicy, veiny patriotism from time to time? On the other hand, the cops do function in a way I actually like, since a witness has to call the cops on you, which you can prevent by softly nudging them into the asphalt. If you're too inept or lazy to do that, both of which apply to me, they'll call the cops and they'll actually have to find you within a certain area, which isn't too hard to escape since they don't magically pop their way into existence to chase you down to the ends of the earth, unlike in Garfield Goes to Africa, where the cops instantly know your exact location, and if you don't roadrunner the hell out of there, you'll spend the next 15 minutes trying to lose them and the dick-headed player on the jet bike trying to mow you down. Oh wait, once you're spotted, it's exactly like that? Minus the other player? Well, fuck me then, Jim. One little detail I really like over Gran Turismo Ascendance is that when you crash or get the cops on you with the person in the car, they'll remark on it, but instead of cutting back into the voice line like nothing ever happened, they actually organically go back into the conversation with something like, now where was I? Oh yeah, so this slut ripped off her clothes like super broad and leaped onto my cat. That's about the only organic thing in this world that I like, unlike organic food. Seriously, how do people eat that shit? Stupid fucking vegans. Another detail that I like is when you fail a mission, you get a cutscene where it's like an alternate ending, as if that failure is its own canon universe. It kinda beats out the paparazzi taking a picture of my death in GTA 5. Since we're on the subject of death and failure, the combat blows, but in a good way. It's crazy that in a game where you shoot guns, they actually have recoil rather than relying solely on a spread mechanic. I hate spread since it's completely uncontrollable without pausing your shots, and you tell me how viable that is in a completely random gunfight on the streets of West Philadelphia born and raised. Not to mention the fact that Mafia 3 doesn't have the Rockstar patented press L2 to aimbot to the nearest minority system when it comes to the aiming. You have to aim like an actual person instead of a fighting robot. I would tell Gonorrhea to turn anal to take notes, but that game came out in 2013? Wow. People still play this game daily as if it was brand new. Shows what I know about good game design. The melee combat is pretty weak in this game. It's usually just 3 button presses and a throat slit, neck snap, or curb stomp to kill an enemy. And yeah, while in GTA 5 you can just kinda sucker punch people into oblivion all day, at least it's humorous, because they fall face first into the concrete. From what I've played, the only open world game that did melee combat right was GTA 4. You could just kinda button mash, but you had to time dodges and counters to get the most out of the combat, which took some skill, rather than in 5 where you just hold down the button to dodge. And even lower on that is Mafia, which feels like a 3D beat 'em up, because you can't even dodge. To be fair to Mafuba 3, you do have an option to do a brutal takedown by holding down the melee button and releasing it at a certain point, where Lincoln channels his inner Bloodborne and... holy shit, that was awesome! Really, it's only for style points. Most of the time it'll just get you shot in the noggin. I mean, when it actually works. I can give the game some points for being easier just to run up and beat the shit out of everyone. It is rather satisfying to isolate a guy and give him a knuckle sundae and finish it off with a barrage of headbutts with the head equivalent of a wrecking ball. Get it? Wrecking balls are black, he's black, and bald? Ha! Oh, I'm gonna go sever my own spinal cord with tweezers for that one. I'm usually against the whole strawberry jam caked on my screen and saturation being turned all the way down when I'm about to die, but it's actually helpful here. The amount of times I've gotten to a combat situation and gays don't need rights. Wait a minute, what? In Great Turpentine Assassination, where I got shot several times and just kinda didn't notice it because the game doesn't give me enough visual cues other than my character flinching, which most of the time I can't even pay attention to because I'm about to get a rocket to the dick, is absurd. After playing that game, I've grown to appreciate my grayscale and jam, because my tiny jigaboo brain just can't register blood and bullet holes on my character as, you should probably take cover, dipshit. I say that, but what ruins all of it and makes the combat easier than sexing up a woman after they've been roofied by Bill Cosby is the slow-mo gunplay. The game takes place in the 1960s, and we all know slow motion wasn't invented until the early 2000s because everyone thought it was cool, and it shows here. There's literally no reason for this mechanic to exist other than to neuter the half-decent combat. Make headshots easier, it said to me. when I booted up the game and then promptly started writing this part of the script. I honestly refuse to use this mechanic at all, except for the express purpose of getting footage for this part, because using it is about as fun as getting forced to slowly stroke your chicken when you really want to choke that motherfucker out until it turns blue. Without the slow-mo gunplay, the combat even on normal is actually challenging because you die so quickly. This is truly the Dark Souls of open world games. I only ever die because I roll up in my jalopy, which are notorious for being loud as fuck, hop out, and get spotted immediately. I'd promptly run into the center of the action and not use any cover because I thought I was a black Terminator. When I tried to use cover, there was always an enemy giving me the
Uh-oh, retard alert!
look because I practically sat in the open with several fit white guys surrounding me with their guns out where they can easily do God's dirty work upon me. And I just came up with the porn parody of this game. Mafia Threesome, available now in your nearest porn store, wherever the hell those are nowadays. On the flip side of that, there's a stealth. And what is there to really say about that? Other than it'd be a really awkward conversation after your parents walk in on you playing this game, and you're currently a giant black guy creeping up on some dainty white dude, and getting into fart sniffing proximity before bashing over the head with your big, meaty hands. Alternatively, you can use and abuse the tried and true method of sitting behind a wall, letting out a cheeky whistle, and wait for a dumbass to walk close and give him a quick wee-ow and drag him into the depths. Or get a silenced pistol and proceed to headshot every mick in sight and watch as they look around frantically searching for you, none the wiser to your position. So what I'm trying to say is the stealth is basic as fuck, which again, isn't a bad thing in this type of game. If I wanted complicated stealth mechanics, I'd go play the last good game that came from Konami. Oh! Fuck you, Metal Gear Survive. More like Metal Gear shit. Sorry about that, it came out of nowhere. Just like the conclusion to this video. Ha! I'll play you like...
Damn fiddle!
How do you feel now? Do you feel angry, appalled, disappointed, and disgusted? Well, you should be, you fucking mongoloid, because what you just watched was a hate crime against intelligence. I felt kind of mad about this game, despite the fact that I wiped my ass with it in every aspect, and you already know how that goes with me. Even with me not being a narrative-focused guy, I still noticed the glaring flaws in the story structure. I feel like they had some neat ideas like the Rackets, or handing over control of areas to someone you yourself have to choose, and having consequences depending on your choices. But it just wasn't executed very well in the long run. The gameplay itself was alright, especially because I was a big black dude, slaughtering hundreds of puny white twinks, because I really just needed that escapism of letting the black Hitler inside of me run wild on some crackers. Then again, you can slaughter hundreds of blacks as well, so it really goes both ways for me. Just like everything else in this shit show. You really could do worse in terms of the open world GTA clone genre of games. Might I suggest Wristwatch Dogs as the worst. Unlike Imaginary Gaze Network, Metallica Critic, or Fully Ripe Tomatoes, I'm not going to give this game any kind of score because I feel like that would sully my already piss poor attempt at a comedic review. So instead, I'm just going to recommend this game to the Ku Klux Klan, people who have watched every episode of Guiding Light in one sitting before it stopped airing, and people who like Grand Theft Auto but don't mind a little bit.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all.